have leaders in the United States that are sitting here actively talking about creating a food crisis. They know there's going to be a food crisis. They know their policies are going to result in a food crisis. They intentionally starved people in Afghanistan. They intentionally starved people in Venezuela. They are now taking measures to hurt Russia that they know will result in starving a lot of people not in Russia. They intentionally took measures that provoked a conflict in Ukraine and forced Russia to have to intervene and protect the people of the Donbass regions. They took these measures, and now the results are coming. Is defund the police code for privatize the police. Now the results are coming. The results are pouring in. They are pouring in. And we got a couple months here before the to use the New York City expression, before the shit hits the fan. You ever hear that in New York City? That's the New Yorker. Before the shit hits the fan, brother. When the shit hits the fan, as they say. I mean, what is that? Do people throw shit at like fans? Like, that's gross. Don't put shit on fans. Not a good thing. But I mean, I'm not trying to be funny here, but this is a very serious situation. Like, we're sitting back and we're on the brink of a global famine. Joe Biden has acknowledged this. Everyone knows it. Crops are going to fail. There's major droughts in 6 states at this point. Russia's not exporting their fertilizer. I mean, it's happening. We are on the brink. Social credit score, IA, track and trace. We are on the brink of a man-made famine created by the Wall Street imperialists, created by the United States and their policies, created by the British, created by hostility to Russia, and they're okay with it. I mean, and the craziest thing is, my whole life, I have been told that in Russia and in China, the communists created man-made famines. Right? That's what we were all told. It was the communists who created man-made famines. I heard this. I remember, and I heard it. I didn't just hear it when I was a kid. When I was a kid, they told me the Soviet Union, they've never accomplished anything. They were just all poor and starving and miserable because communism doesn't work. And they were just so stupid. They didn't realize communism doesn't work. And everyone was poor and starving and miserable the whole time in the Soviet Union. Everyone was just poor and starving and miserable. And then in 1991, they got free. And now, and in the 90s, Russia was so free and happy because capitalism finally came back. And it's the opposite of the truth. It was under the leadership of the Communist Party that Russia became an industrial superpower. And it wiped out illiteracy. And it industrialized. And it had the world's biggest steel mills and the world's biggest power plants. And I mean, it was like the Soviet Union, rose up from nothing. It invented space travel. It defeated the Nazis. It invented the AK-47 rifle. It invented LED lights. I mean, before the Soviet Union, Russia was an impoverished agrarian country. With the Soviet Union, with Stalin's leadership and his 5-year economic plans, Russia became a modern industrialized country. These are facts. You never know that. It's just, you can't say that because everybody knows communism never worked anywhere. It's an obvious reality that communism had very dramatic good results for Russia, including raising millions from poverty, industrializing, etc. And no one can ever talk about this. And I've ranted and raved about this for a long time. But one of the narratives that we get is that, well, the way I was taught, I remember I took okay. All right. I took a class in college, the history of modern Europe. And I remember they were talking about the Soviet Union. The only thing this professor showed, this professor, I couldn't believe it. We're talking about the Soviet Union. It's the history of modern Europe from like 1800 up into today. And I mean, no mention of the Spanish Civil War, wasn't relevant. And It was an awful class. I mean, I knew way more history. I was sitting there, and this is like, we're talking 10, 15 years ago, but even then I knew all kinds of things. But her entire history, the entire history she gave of the Soviet Union was a slide of somebody starving. It was a slide of somebody starving. And she was told, she said, oh, in the Soviet Union, millions of people starved to death because of communism, because of Stalin. And I said, whoa. I said, what about, wiping out illiteracy? What about raising millions of people from poverty? What about all of that? Oh, yeah, but that's not important. It's just, that millions of people starved to death. See, in the Soviet Union, they had a man-made famine. A man-made famine. There was a man-made famine. Stalin was up there in the Kremlin, and he said, my goodness, there's too much food in this country. These Soviet people are eating too much, and it makes me and my evil heart mad. So what shall I do? I, the evil Stalin, shall create a famine, and it shall be my famine, and it shall starve millions of people. That's what I was told. I was taught that in school. And if you go to school in Ukraine, in the regions controlled by these, extremists, the Kiev government, you're going to be told that. And go to school in Britain, you're going to hear that. And it's like, you look into the history, who brought tractors to the Ukrainian countryside? The Soviet Union. Who built the modern farming system of Ukraine? The Soviet Union. Who brought electricity to Ukraine? The Soviet Union. Who brought running water to Ukraine? The Soviet Union. Were there deaths of malnutrition in Ukraine and Moldova and Russia and Belarus before 1917? Yes, all the time. And who ended that? Who created, for the first time in Soviet history, when you didn't have deaths of malnutrition? In the Soviet Union. I mean, you can argue, and I mean, there are legit arguments to be made, and I'm not a historian by any means. There are arguments that maybe Soviet policies were not implemented correctly, that the way they went about having private farming with the new economic policy and then rapidly shifting to collectivizing agriculture, that was done sloppily and had consequences. And I'm open to hearing that. There's legit arguments that can be made about that. But the reality is, before the Soviet Union, people died of malnutrition and starvation all the time. And the Soviet Union cured that by building a modern agricultural system. These are facts. And if you cure famines in a country, and there were famines all the time before you came to power, and then you come into power and you cure them. If before people are, plowing their fields with oxen, and when you come in, suddenly they're plowing their fields with modern mechanical tractors, that generally is success. That generally indicates you did a damn good job. But not if you're the Soviet Union. I mean, and it's even wilder because there was a famine and food shortage in 1932 all over the Soviet Union, right? There was a bad harvest in Ukraine, and there were political problems with the kulaks, who said who were these wealthy peasants who were hoarding their grain, and there was food shortages in Russia, there were food shortages in Moldova, there were food shortages in Belarus, and there were food shortages in Ukraine. But now we're told that not only was this famine caused by communism, and not only does this famine prove that communism can never accomplish anything, but on top of that, they now argue that this famine was somehow an intentional genocide against Ukrainians, right? Not that it was a bad policy that caused the process of building a modern agricultural system to have problems along the way. No. We're told that Stalin was sitting up there and he said, not only shall I intentionally create a famine, but I shall use this famine to wipe out people of a specific ethnicity. And that, again, that doesn't match either. I mean, so there's this whole narrative about man-made famines that does not Sex work. Answered that one before, but I'll answer it again. There's this whole narrative about famines that does not account for all of the huge strides the Soviet Union made. That has it in the man-made famine. Man-made famine. There's a man-made famine. Same thing about China, right? I mean, with China, before the Communist Party came in, were there famines? You betcha. There was a famine in 1928, and Edgar Snow walked around and he saw all the starving people, and he said, how is this possible? People were starving because there wasn't a strong central government that could organize relief. People were starving because fields that should have been growing food were growing opium poppies for the British and the drug dealers under the British. And there was a famine in China before the communists came in, and then there was a famine. There was famines all the time in China before the communists came in. There were malnutrition related deaths in China routinely. As a result of the opium wars, where the British came into China and forced China to not have a strong economy, and forced China's economy to basically, not go forward and just basically exist as a captive market for the British Empire. As a result of that, hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions of people died as a result of economic progress being halted by British domination of China. What is the current purpose of it? All right. Writing it down. And, as a result of China being held under the boot heels of Western capitalism, all kinds of people died. All kinds of people died of malnutrition. But somehow we're told that there was a famine, the Great Leap Forward famine. And that proves communism's bad, because there was one famine under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Meanwhile, it's the Chinese Communist Party that built the modern agricultural system. It's the Chinese Communist Party that electrified all of China. It's the Chinese Communist Party that brought tractors, they called them iron oxen, to the Chinese countryside. It's the Chinese Communist Party that's made China the second largest economy in the world. That is the real results of the Chinese Communist Party's leadership. But yet they point to a famine, Great Leap Forward famine. That proves that the communists have never accomplished anything. They've never done anything good, and it was a genocide, man-made famine. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so while they've been lecturing us all about a man-made famine, oh my God, there's going to be a man-made famine, the man-made famine, now we have a situation. We have a situation where the capitalist powers, the major imperialist countries, Britain, the United States, France, and Germany, are sitting there realizing that their policies against Russia, and their policies in Afghanistan, and their policy in Venezuela, and their policies in Africa are going to lead to a man-made famine. And they're fine with that. They are sitting there recognizing that millions of people are going to die because of their war with Russia, their blocking of Russian fertilizer, their tearing apart of Ukraine with a hostile, civil war, and escalating the conflict there and pouring more weapons into Ukraine, their sanctions, plus the drought. History of the Nazis and NATO and West German leadership. And we have a situation where they are on the brink of creating this global food shortage. And they're openly doing it, and no one's saying anything about it, except for the Russians, except for the Chinese. No one's saying anything about it. I mean, it's shocking to me. They are doing exactly what they falsely accused the Soviet government and the Chinese government of doing. What you've always been told about communism, that they, sat there and said, oh, it's a boring day. Let's have a famine. Let's starve these people because we are evil communists. That's what these people are doing. That's what Joe Biden's doing. He's sitting there. He's planning a famine. He's openly presiding over a famine. He knows there's going to be a famine. And he's okay with that because he wants to hurt Russia. Now, I mean, if you cannot, I mean, this is the most blatant example. You can talk about the hypocrisy of it. And you can talk about how this is very much a power grab. I've used this example many times, but Mexico has been growing its own food since long before Christopher Columbus showed up. But now Mexico imports the overwhelming majority of its food from American agribusiness because of the North American Free Trade Agreement. There were farmers all over Haiti. Did you know that? There used to be farmers all over Haiti. But then the North American Free Trade Agreement came in, and American agribusiness went in there, and now Haitians are not growing their own food. They're importing their food from the United States. And on top of that, they are starving, and they are eating dirt mixed with oil. And these gas prices have killed, these gas prices very significantly cut into the income of Haitians. If you look at the situation in Haiti, they always, you always talk about problems in socialist countries. Haiti is a great example of how domination by Wall Street, the IMF, and the World Bank have just destroyed a country. And there you go. This is what they are doing. And when there's a crisis, smaller farmers go under and big agribusiness gets bigger. And that works on a global scale. When there's a global food crisis, American agribusiness giants will benefit and their competitors will be squashed. And that's what they know that they're going to do. And when you prevent Russia from exporting food, why, people are going to have to make it up by buying it from somebody, and they're going to have to buy it from American agribusiness. And when Ukraine is having a big bloody war, and their agricultural output is about half of what it would normally be, well, then people have to buy it from somewhere. They buy it from the United States. The price goes up because there's higher demand. And it looks like Kellogg's and Kraft and all kinds of American food suppliers are about to make a killing off of killing. They're going to make a killing off of killing. That's very interesting. I didn't realize that, Peter. They're about to make a killing off of fomenting a global food crisis. All right? This is insanity. This is utter insanity. And Russia's going to be fine because Putin has rebuilt the Russian agricultural system. The farm system in Russia has been rebuilt. They have bigger crop output in Russia than ever before, and they won't be able to export it because of these sanctions. So Russians are going to have plenty of food. Meanwhile, people all across the world won't. China's going to be okay. China, again, they've got their own food system. They are food self-sufficient. They've built a modern agricultural system, and they're helping other countries to do that as well. So China's going to be okay. Russia and China are not going to have starvation. They are not going to have malnutrition. They have built themselves up, and they have barricaded themselves, and they're not going to have this problem. The problem is going to be in the parts of the world dominated by capitalism, by Wall Street imperialism. They are going to have a mass famine. And Joe Biden's okay with that because Russia's bad, because he's mad at Russia. This is utter insanity. And, the droughts, we're talking about this. There's a lot of these ranchers, these small farmers, they're going to get swallowed up. And the Democrats have always hated those people, right? You remember that whole thing with the Bundy Ranch and the ranchers in Oregon. The Democrats have always hated those people, right? The Democrats work for the big agricultural companies, Kraft and big agricultural monopolies. They don't work for the small farmers. The small farmers, it's farm populism. You can go back to the 1980s, the farm crisis. The Democrats have always kind of hated the ranchers and the small farmers. They've hated them. They've always hated them. They're too independent. They're hillbillies. They're white trash. They don't like them. The Democrats love those big food manufacturers, right? That's who they like. And so the Democrats are getting ready to preside over a food crisis. And it just so happens to align, this global food crisis that they're fomenting because of Russia, just happens to align at the same time with droughts in 6 states, right? I read the states before. I'll read them again for those of you who are just joining us. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nevada, Oregon, and Montana are all on the brink of having droughts. There's going to be serious droughts and wildfires in those states. So small farmers in those states are going to go under. And big American agribusiness corporations will sweep up the profits. I mean, this is what is happening. They are fomenting a famine to secure their monopoly, to beat back Russia, to beat back China, to beat back Venezuela and Iran, to secure their monopoly on the oil markets and on the energy markets and in the global food markets and agricultural markets. The imperialists are about to foment a food crisis. This is insanity. This is utter insanity. And I mean, I don't quite know how anyone can be okay with this. I mean, these are really, really evil people that are running our government. And they are very aware of what they are doing. And if you are at all of a humanitarian, tell me what about these humanitarians? They're always like, what is it? Is it, Angelina Jolie and Bono and who are all these like liberal celebrities that are all like, yeah, man, I'm going to go fight in Ukraine. And, they're having big concerts, and they're all, what is his name? I don't remember. All these Hollywood celebrities, they're always so concerned about African people. Right. And they're talking about AIDS and they're talking about how they're going to feed the world. And, where are these people? I mean, where's the big concert on TV to raise money for this? Where is it? Right. Where are all these Hollywood liberal elites that are so concerned? Where's the TV ads to raise money for this? I'm not hearing about that. Instead, I'm hearing about how Sean Penn wants to go fight in Ukraine. He wants to fight in Ukraine so that the farming doesn't happen and they don't produce the wheat. I mean, all these people that are all, oh yeah, man, I feed the world, where are they? Where are they? Where's, what is it? We are the world. And where is it? I mean, that used to be what all these liberal Hollywood celebrities always talked about. So they always talked about, we are the world. And yeah, I mean, where are these people? Cornell West. Where are they? I mean, I'm not seeing them. I mean, I'm just utterly blown away by this. And where are all the socialists on this? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, every socialist voice ever, the DSA should be having demonstrations right now. Feed the world. Don't have war with Russia. The RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party, should be in the street saying the same thing. The anarchists and the Trotskyites and all these people, the labor movement. Think of all the jobs that could be created if the United States immediately went to work resolving this food crisis. Think of all the jobs. I mean, the unions. Imagine if the AFL-CIO had a national march in Washington, food emergency, hire millions of workers at union wages to go feed people around the world, to rebuild our farm system, but no, they're not going to do that. Right? This is the situation here. And China is raising the alarm, and Russia is raising the alarm. Who are the good forces of good in the world? Let me ask you that. I just want to ask you that for real, right? People always get on me, Caleb, you work for the Russians, you work in Russian media. Who are the forces of good in the world right now? The people that are ignoring the global food crisis that's about to happen, or the people warning the world and trying to do something about it? Who's good? China is raising the alarm about the global food crisis. I heard him talking about it at the UN Security Council 2 days ago. Russia is raising the alarm about the global food crisis. They're raising the alarm and they're saying, we don't want millions of people to starve to death. Can we figure this out? Meanwhile, Joe Biden is just ranting against Russia. Boris Johnson is just ranting against Russia. Macron is just ranting against Russia. Theories of surplus value. They're just ranting against Russia. And I'm sorry, who is good and who is evil here? Russia has a lot of problems. China has a lot of problems. There's corruption there, etc. But there's one government, there's one force in the world, there's one axis that is trying to stop millions of starvation-related deaths. And there's another axis that is actively fomenting policies they know will lead to millions of starvation-related deaths. I mean, it doesn't take a genius, doesn't take a mind reader to know what's going on here. Now, I could talk about a few different things here. There's a couple other things. The rest of my opening remarks are going to be kind of scattered. I have a lot of like loose ends I want to tie up. You ever do that? You have like a lot of different loose ends, things that are important to our community.